and happy Thursday. Welcome to live stream number 51. Today is August 24th. Time flies. Hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for taking the time for joining today's live stream. Today's topic is 3 awesome right mouse click functions for CAM that I think you should know about. You know, sometimes these kind of functions just kind of like hide on you. So if you're watching this, you're probably watching the recording, as we still have people kind of like, well, Tommy's already here. Awesome. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you so much for taking the time to join. Down in the description area, as always, my email address, lars.christensen@autodesk.com, if there's any specific topics you would like to see on these live streams. See, we got more people coming in. Absolutely appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time. So like I said, 3 awesome right mouse click functions for CAM. So today is all about CAM. If you don't like CAM, you know, take the day off. But I feel like that many times you model up your part inside of Fusion 360, and then it's time to program it. And normally, you know, we're always expecting these things to go a lot quicker than we think. So by the time we get to the CAM, then it's all rush getting the job done. So these commands might, you know, you might have not had a chance to actually work with them or even seen them. So let's jump right into it. Let's get into Fusion. That's where you guys want to be anyways. So I have this part here, nothing fancy, and we have a bunch of operations in here. And the right-click menu, it actually works in different places. Of course, you have the standard drop-downs down here, and I kind of like do a little bit of a mismatch. But be aware of, if you right-click in here, you actually, in the space, you can actually even change workspaces. But you also have all the different operations in here. So that's just a little, I don't know if that's one of my awesome free clicks, but it's just nice to know that you could be working over here, right-click, and you could actually be going in and grabbing toolpath. Now, the first one I want to show you, if I right-click on the setup itself, one of the ones that really I think is great is the machining time here. So if I click on that one, you get this window that will open up. Gives you a couple of different inputs to change in here. And then the software gives you a calculation plus the amount of tool changes. And then in the end, it gives you a machining time in here. Now, this machining time is critical normally many times if you got to quote something or if somebody asks you when the heck it's going to be done. Also be aware of that it works for each operation. So if I go over to I right click on the setup, machining time, and I see 18 minutes. And then I can actually go in and I could start investigate some of the different ones by themselves. So I can right click and I could go in here and say machining time just for this adaptive, and it will show me the machining time in here. Now, these machining times are all calculated out of your feet and speeds in your tool. So if you right click and hit edit on your operation, in here you have all the feeds and speeds. Now, I've said before, feeds and speeds, I normally recommend you starting out with what your tool provider provides you, because the tool, you know, that can be one of the factors, of course, how you're holding the parts also. And all this stuff with your feeds and speeds in here, if you go into your tooling tab, you can, of course, put that in for each tool. So you have that in a custom library. I did do a live stream on the tool library, so, you know, getting into to feeds and speeds. One of the things that is important to remember when we are talking about machining time, because this is where, you know, I many times get questions from people, are the machining time really accurate inside of Fusion 360? And the answer is yes, because for CAM software to calculate time is actually not that difficult, right? So like you're machining around a part, the software knows how long that path is and what your feed is when you're going around. So it's pretty straight math, where I have normally run into trouble myself in standing at the machine is actually all the stuff the machine is doing when it's not engaged in the material. So, rabbiting around and things like that. And if you're brand new to machining, or if you're only kind of like doing onesie, twosies, kind of like a couple of parts here and there, you don't really think of that time in between cuts to be important. But it actually does, it's normally there where your arrow is when it's moving along. I one time had to quote this one job where we had to make like 130,000 parts a year. So this was like a horizontal machine where we're going to have a bunch of tombstones and 130,000 parts a year. That means that you had to get a specific machine just dedicated to just run that one type parts. And when we quoted that job, I actually had to program the entire job and stand out in front of the machine with a stopwatch because, well, if you're off 10 seconds times 130,000 parts, that's a huge margin. So if you are getting a disruption in between your machining time, exit machining time, and what Fusion is giving you, do some testing in there between, what your feeds and speeds are, and what your exit running them out at the machine. I didn't mean to get off a tangent there. But that machining time inside of Fusion in here, either per operation, right-click, machining time, and doing it for the entire setup, machining time, that is a critical thing. And I would say even if you don't quote, if you're somebody else quoting for you, you should still kind of like trying to keep track of how you're doing per time. I just think it's good practice. All right. That reminds me of another thing that I actually wasn't planning on showing you here. But if you go into your setup and you go into edit, so here we have our setup. You're all familiar with that. Now, if we go over to the stock tab, right now I'm using fixed size box. And the reason I'm using fixed size box is because, if you know what size stock you should have in your machine, you should definitely put a pair of verniers on, and then there's no excuse to put it in here. But what I was talking about before with like quoting and stuff, if you're using the relative size box where Fusion just throws kind of like a stock boundary around your stock, be aware of that right down here, it gives you the minimum sizes needed to machine your part. This is another extremely valuable thing in a quoting environment because you normally have to order your steel, at least I would say 3 or 4 days before you actually got to machine your part. So that Fusion is giving you this feedback right here. It's just quick to be like, oh yeah, that's the minimum size stock versus going in and start measuring and different things like that. So it just throws kind of like a virtual box around and it gives you those dimensions. That was right in the stock tab under the setup tab. All right, back to our right mouse buttons. Another one you should know about, if you right click in here, is that there is a compare and edit. So there's another live stream that you can go and search for about CAM templates. And the idea about CAM templates is that when we verify something on the shop floor, we ran this part, we know all our feeds and speeds and settings are good, we can store them as a template. So when we have a similar part, we can just pull those in. Because the biggest risk there is when you are programming with any CAM software is that when you're inside of all these different checkboxes and columns, that you hit the wrong button or you put the wrong decimal place in or something like that. So the great thing about templates, right click, store as templates, is that you can store all the stuff when you have verified that everything is good. But this compare and edit is actually kind of handy too. If I go in and select all my operations and I right click and I click compare edit, Fusion will actually give me this dialog box here that will show me all kinds of different parameters in here. So let me just go in here, select maybe these two, compare and edit here. You will see that we get the 2D pocket here, and then we get the adaptive clearing here. So we can see all the parameters that are for those two operations, the adaptive clearing in this column, the first one, and the 2D pocket over here. And this is a way that you can pretty quickly go in and just make sure that you have some of the same settings in here. Maybe, you know, there's a contour linearization, minimum cutting radius, are they set right? And you can change them right in here. Actually, the height tab might be a good one. You know, you can go in, you can look at these things, lead in, lead out, and all this stuff. So there's a way to compare two toolpaths, and you can go right in here and you can change them right in here instead of open each one up individually. Open them up individually and go in and make, you know, the change in here, and then going out of this one and go into the adaptive and stuff like that. So right click, compare and edit, and you can, like you can see, you can select multiple operations, and you know, there you can see all that. Another thing to be aware of is there is suppress, protect, and optional. You should know what these can do. So suppress means really the same thing as they do in a CAD environment. If I check suppress, then this facing operation is kind of like taken out of the mix. I haven't deleted it, but I have kind of made sure that that is not, if I post this out right now, I'm not going to get the facing operation. So this can be good if you have a program with a lot of operations and you maybe are just turning things on and off, want to simplify it a little bit or something like that. So right click and suppress or unsuppress, of course, whatever you want. The next thing is protect. So this one, you know how when we're changing things in our software, these goes red and gives you a warning, and you can right click and generate toolpath, and they will update for whatever we have done in the design. Well, if you right click and you click protect, you have now locked that toolpath. That toolpath will now, it will not update now. I used to use protect or lock a lot when I had, like, again, bigger programs where many times I kind of like used to program in stages. So I would, you know, throw all my toolpath on, all my different operations, then I will come back in again and kind of like tweaking things as you're going through simulation and just, you know, seeing, oh, I need to add lead in, lead out, or whatever it is. Then when I was done with it and I kind of like said, okay, I verified in the simulation that this toolpath is good, I would protect it. So now I knew where I was in the order, because you're always getting like a phone call or the boss comes in with a question or something like that. So right click and protect is super helpful. The last one down here is an interesting one. It's optional. But you know, if you're not familiar with CAM, you might be like, oh, machining, you might be like, optional what? What is my option? Optional is like when you're running. Ever run out of the machine and you sometimes can turn on optional stop? And if you ever done that and looked at your code, what happens is that in the machine code they put a / in front of the code, and then if you have optional stop on, it will not stop. If the / is on, it will just skip past that one if optional stop is on. So what optional lets you do in here is you can check that, and if you're, and you can see it kind of gives you a little / or / whatever it is. I can't remember. Maybe it is / in your code. A / here. Now you have to set this up in your post so it actually recognizes this. But if it's set up, that means that when you check optional, you get that / or / in front of your code. This could be useful if you, for example, are programming, let's say you have two machines and one of them have a tool probe on it and the other one don't. Well, instead of and you maybe don't know what program they were going to run it on, you could do an optional for the tooling probing, post it out, and then the operator could just, if he's deciding to run the program on the machine without a tooling probe, he could just turn the optional stop on in the machine, and it will pass all that code. And if, of course, if he's machining on the one with the probe on, don't turn it on, and then it will run. So that's what that is. If you didn't, yeah, block delete, yes, kind of same idea, I believe. Good question, Derek. Isn't that also? Jared is right. He's calling me out here. Optional stop is MO1. You're absolutely right. Yeah, block delete. That's awesome. Thank you, Jared. Yes, I mean block delete. For block delete, / MO1 is optional stop. I should look over here on my controller and see that. All right, cool. Now you just have to play with it yourself. All right, the other thing, so I talked about already in the right mouse button in here, I talked about storing as templates. If you're not familiar with that, you should definitely check out that live stream. And then the other thing is show log. You should know about this one. So sometimes you're getting warnings, like these orange warnings on your toolpath, and if you click show log, then now of course I don't have one, but you can see down here, then you actually get a message log, and that can give you an indication of what that warning is. Sometimes the warning means that you can't run. Sometimes it's just an indication that something had been overwritten or something like that. The last one I want to give you, and it's probably one of my favorites, but it's a little bit hidden. If you go in and you expand your operation here, you get the tooling library, work coordinate system, and then you get kind of like the tool calculation here. By the way, if you just double click on the tool here, it opens up your tool library. I think many times if you called me and says, hey, go into the tool library, I would actually right click, edit, and click here. Well, it's just a stupid habit of mine. What you should absolutely do is either just double click here, or you should go up here and click on tool library, take you same place. You could also just double click instead of right click and edit, I guess. But yeah, I think I'm set on right click, edit, and then go over that. The last thing I want to show you is down here. If you right click on the calculation down here, I think this is what we will call this tab. Down here, there is a view toolpath. If I click on that one, opens up with the wrong screen. It will actually show you all the linear movement that is coming out of that toolpath. And I absolutely love that. So again, expand your operation for whatever tool you want, right click and view toolpath. Because if you have ever been standing out of the machine and the machine is moving over to a location where you're like, wait a minute, you hit feed hold, is this really where this pocket is supposed to be? You know, and then you're standing looking at the screen and you're looking at your coordinates. This going in here and just clicking here is a quick way to just cross-reference, are these the right coordinates I see on the machine versus what I see on the screen on the control versus what I see in here. So there's a little hidden in here, but I think that this is a super duper little function to have when you are in like those troubleshooting modes. That was absolutely all that I was planning on showing for this Thursday. It's a short live stream, but I think these right mouse button clicks, and they work other places too. Like try to go into simulation, for example, doing a simulation and right mouse button in there, and you actually get some cool options. Let me just check in here. You can see we got 45 people in here, which is absolutely awesome. We got people from all over: Mexico, Alabama, Norway, Stockholm. Absolutely awesome. Brian from Kentucky. Casey, is that Kentucky? I'm not sure. The logs do not seem very informative when I have looked at them. Well, Brian, yeah, I think that there's always something that can be better, but they have actually saved me a few times where I was scratching my head. So I'm not saying that they're gonna come up and point you absolutely in the right direction, but sometimes they'll actually give you a kind of like a hint of where it is, if it's lead in, or if it's the passer step, or something like that. Thank you so much, guys. Don't forget, if you like these live streams, thumbs up. If you don't, be honest, thumbs down. And if you haven't already, I would absolutely appreciate if you will hit that subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button, hit the notification next to it, and that's how you find out about these live streams. Tomorrow is Friday, another week. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the basic navigations inside of Fusion 360. So I just want to kind of like spend a few minutes and make sure that you know all the different commands, as zooming in, zooming out, looking right directly at something, how you can change your camera view, and a couple of other tips and tricks that hopefully you can find handy. I'm going to do what I normally do. I'm going to end the broadcast. So if you're watching the recording, thank you so much for taking the time for that. And I'm going to jump into the live stream and say hi to everybody and see if there's any other questions in there. Until the next time, have an awesome, awesome day.